So here we go. This is Anonymity and Non-Identity Cases by Tomi Francis in the Analysis Journal of Philosophy. I hope you're all very excited about this. I'm pumped. According to the principle of anonymity, any two populations with the same anonymous distribution of well-being are equally good. Although it might appear innocuous, anonymity is a substantive and powerful principle. It implies that differences in identities of those who exist are evaluatively irrelevant and thereby simplifies population axiology significantly. Perhaps partly for this reason, anonymity is often assumed in formal treatments of population axiology, sometimes without much in the way of supporting argument. But anonymity is not obviously true, because it is not obviously true that differences in identity make no all things considered evaluative difference. If we were going to accept anonymity, we had better have a good argument for doing so. My aim in this paper is to provide one. Okay, so I guess it's saying, look, the idea that different populations can have like equivalent amounts of happiness is it ignores that there's differences in the populations, and so they might say that their happiness is identical, but there might be incommensurabilities the way they view happiness, and so the happiness might be of different qualities. And so even though there might, like, on some measures say that their distribution of well-being is equally good, it's not exactly the same sort of well-being, perhaps. So the author says, the crux of my argument for anonymity is a compelling principle about value in the non-identity cases first discussed by Parfit, in which we can either bring about the existence of a better off person or alternatively bring about the existence of a different worse off person. According to the non-identity principle, in such cases, the outcome in which the better off person comes to exist is better overall. The main technical result of this paper is that given some standard structural assumptions, the non-identity principle implies anonymity. After demonstrating this result, I shall argue that if the non-identity principle were false, it would follow that replacing worse off for better off people, while at the same time improving the lives of existing people, often fails to make things better overall. Since such combinations of changes clearly do make things better overall, the non-identity principle must be true. Okay, so it's saying, like, look, you can sort of like gerrymander the numbers to like futz with people and how well off everyone is, but like they're going to say something about how that works. You know, it's interesting, but like who knows exactly what's going on here. But it's saying, look, how do we actually measure what it is for a population to be well off? And that's like the real question here. And then we'll see what they have to say. Before we turn to the argument from the non-identity principle, let me clarify the background framework in which we shall operate. I take the notion of a life to be primitive, where lives are understood to be individuated by the people living them and sorts of lives they are. I assume that there is an at least as good as relation on lives, which is transitive and reflexive, and the betterness and equal goodness and other evaluative relations on lives are defined from this at least as good as relation in the usual way. And this is exactly where we're going to have a problem. The idea that at least as good as if you assume that there is an at least as good a relation on lives, which is transitive and reflexive. What does this mean? This is one of these classic things in they found out in psychology and economics. It's that if you like peanuts more than you like pretzels, and you like pretzels more than you like, say, Cheetos, do you therefore like peanuts more than you like Cheetos? Because you like peanuts more than you like pretzels, and pretzels more than you like Cheetos. The answer is no. Things don't work like that. People like things for different reasons. And so the idea that one life is clearly better than another life might be fine, but then this life might be better than the third life. Does that mean that the first one is better than the third one? Not necessarily. And they found this out that personal preferences aren't like this. So the question is, why does this person think that if it doesn't work for things as dumb as like snack food, because I think that's kind of where the initial study was, why would it also hold on whole lives for people? I have no idea. Okay. As shown by Arrhenius, we can identify well-being levels with equivalent classes of lives under the the equal goodness relation. In practice, I shall represent well-being levels by numbers, but this is for ease of presentation only. Yeah, because I mean, what's a 50 well-being level versus a 52 well-being level? Like, the numbers don't mean anything because they don't correspond to any real value. It's not like you can count up well-beings. The object of comparison are populations, which I take to be finite sets of lives in which no person appears twice. Yeah, let me actually, know what I want to do? No, I don't know how to write that down yet. I wanted to draw pictures on the screen, but I can't figure out how to do that yet. Shucks. Anywho, okay. The objects of comparison are populations, which I take to be finite sets of lives in which no person appears twice. We are interested in the at least as good as relation, which is going to be a curly greater than or equal to on populations, with the derived relation is just greater than or equal to, I guess, with the derived relations of betterness, equal goodness, and so on, again being defined in the usual way. I shall allow that greater than or equal to may be incomplete, that is, there may be populations x and y, neither of which is at least as good as the other. I shall, however, make two important assumptions about greater than or equal to. I shall assume that it is option set independent, in the sense that how two populations compare does not depend on any underlying option set in which they're considered, and also transitive. So there's does not depend on anything underlying, and it's transitive. So the transitive thing is the killer here, because the populations are going to be it's just taking it as fundamental that it's going to be transitive. Like I just said, people can't even transitive their snack food, so why would you transitive lives? But yeah, continuing. Although I believe that we should accept choice set independence and transitivity, I shall not argue for them in this paper. Those who doubt one or both of these assumptions, that's me, and also find anonymity to be incredible, might take the lesson of this paper to be that we had better reject transitivity or option set independent betterness in order to maintain the non-identity principle without incurring a commitment to anonymity. Okay, well, I mean, I sound like I'm in that camp already, so maybe that's fine. I agree with this author then. Anonymity, stated more precisely, is the claim that if two populations are anonymously equivalent, meaning that we can find a bijection between the lives in each of the two populations which preserves well-being levels, then these two populations are equally good. Okay, so that means if you could basically find someone in each population that has equal amounts, you can do it, or you can get two sets of people that added up. Those two sets of people would be equal to this two sets of people, so that there's always a way to make the individual amounts of well-being line up between the two populations. It's not just you're throwing everybody together, but you're saying, look, this person is just as happy as this person, and this person is just as happy as this person, and or maybe these two people together are just as happy as these two people together, and therefore you can say, look, we can actually find a bijection, a corresponds between the two populations. It's not just we're adding it up mysteriously. There is a way to do it. Okay, that is enough in the way of the background. On to the argument from the non-identity principle to anonymity. Consider a standard non-identity case in which one must choose between bringing Eve into existence with a better life, or instead bringing Adam into existence with a worse but still good life. Imagine that nobody else is affected by this choice, and that there are no other potentially morally relevant differences at play. Adam and Eve are equally deserving, no impersonally valuable things are affected, and so on. A ceteris paribus clause like this should appear to be taken to apply to all further cases and principles appealed to in this paper. Okay, so you can bring two people in, one that's going to be here, one that's going to be here, but bad is all the way down here. So they're all both good, but one's just a bit better off. One thing I think we should say about this case is that it would be better overall for Eve to exist with a better life rather than Adam to exist with a worse life. Note that this claim is purely evaluative. I am not claiming that it would be wrong to bring Adam into existence, or even that we would have moral reason to bring Eve into existence rather than Adam. These last two claims, while plausible, are somewhat more controversial than the evaluative claim. So they're just defining it as that it would be better to have Eve, in the sense that it is by definition just having a better life. So that's just they're just describing Eve as better off. It also seems that it would be better overall for Eve to exist rather than Adam, regardless of the number, identities, and well-being levels of other people, provided that all these people are entirely unaffected by the choice. More generally, it seems that we should accept the weak non-identity principle. If life L1 is better than life L2, then for population X, not including L1 or L2, persons L plus 1 is better than L plus 2. Yeah, so you're increasing the overall well-being of the population by just having a better life included in it. The weak non-identity principle supports the stronger claim that, additionally, if lives L1 and L2 are equally good, then X plus L1 is equally good as X plus L2. This is because the weak non-identity principle implies that balance between the populations L1 and X plus L2 is sensitive to the arbitrarily small improvements and deteriorations. It would be better to add a slightly better version of L1 than to add L2 and vice versa. This kind of sensitivity is widely and correctly held to be strong evidence of equal goodness. Conversely, insensitivity to small improvement is the mark of incommensurability, or symptomatic of imprice equality, and goes so far as to define equal goodness to hold whenever we have sensitivity to all improvements and deteriorations. We are thus justified in inferring from the weak non-identity principle the strong non-identity principle. Life L1 is at least as good as life L2 if and only if for any population X, not including L1 or L2, X and L1 is at least as good as X plus L2. And this is just what they're going to call the non-identity principle. Okay, so like basically, if one life is so much better than the other that any little change doesn't affect it always being better than the other life, then it's, it's the better life. And it will just make, the population more happy overall. Is that a good thing? I don't know. But we're going to that's what this person wants to talk about. We shall now see that the non-identity principle implies anonymity. Oh yeah, let me note real fast that if you're taking a look at this stuff right here, you see this is the at least as good as. That means this is the big old greater than or equal to that they were talking about before. L1, X plus L1 is greater than or equal to L2, and then you could do this for any number of people and you could keep going. But the idea is that this is the real question for me. What the fuck is this plus? What the fuck is a plus sign when you're talking about well-being? Why is my well-being identical to your well-being? We can just add this up. Do I have 3 well-being? That's what they were saying. They're going to do it in terms of money. What the fuck is 3 well-being? What the hell is 50 well-being? I don't have a damn clue what that means. That doesn't mean a damn thing. Your well-being in some sense is incommensurable because your life is different from other people's life, and you might be happy with different things than other people's lives. And so you're subtracting out all the things that actually make your life good to talk about well-being in some way that is nothing to do with you. And so the question is, what is going on when you can just add in the well-being of one person's life to the well-being of everyone else's life? That may not make any sense because what I might like might not be liked by anyone else in society. Like say I'm a mass murderer and I'm having a great life as a mass murderer and I'm just like killing all the people and so happy. And so like this is like providing like massive well-being to me. Is that really going to be a transitive, like, fit in with, like, other people's lives? I don't think so. But, like, they want to say, look, ceteris paribus, all the things are the same. All right, I'm mass murdering somebody else in some other population we're not talking about. So it's like everything else is held the same. What the heck does that mean? I don't know what that means because you don't know what actually goes into all the people's lives that actually make them happy. You're abstracting away from all the things that make people interesting and good. And once you do that, what are we talking about then? These are my problems. Okay, continuing, my gripes aside. We shall now see that the non-identity principle implies anonymity. First, note that the non-identity principle requires that if a single person in one population is replaced by a different person at the same well-being level, the resulting population will be equally good. We can use this fact to show that anonymously equivalent populations must be equally good when they are disjoint, by which I mean that no person belongs to both populations. Given 2 disjoint, anonymously equivalent populations, one population can be transformed into the other by simply replacing each person by their same well-being counterpart along a bijection, witnessing anonymous equivalents one at a time. Yeah, so if you got 2 populations, and in every population there's someone that has the same same well-being. You're switching everybody, and eventually you will switch your whole thing. And if you were only looking at well-being, you could not tell the difference that everyone was switched. The non-identity principle implies that each replacement results in an equally good population, and transitivity then yields that the first population is equally good as the last. This suffices to show that any two disjoint, anonymously equivalent populations must be equally good. Now suppose we have two arbitrarily anonymously equivalent populations, A and B, which might not be disjoint, so there might have some overlap in them. We may construct a third population C, which is anonymously equivalent to but disjoint with both A and B. Since each of A and B are equally as good as C by the previous argument, transitivity requires that A and B are equally as good as each other. The non-identity principle therefore implies anonymity given transitivity. In fact, something stronger can now be proved. The non-identity principle implies that the principle of anonymous Pareto, according to which a population is better than another when the first is anonymously equivalent to a population which is weakly Pareto superior to the second, that is, better for some and at least as good for all. The proof for this claim uses the same sort of idea as the proof of anonymity. We replace each person by their better off person or equally well off counterpart one at a time and use transitivity to chain the betterness claims together. Yeah, so now if you've got two populations where everyone is at least as good and you do the bijection, then you will say, well, each population is at minimal the same, but one of them was probably better because they were at least as good, if not better. And so that way you've got your transitivity now. You say they were the better side, but now they're only equal. Okay, on the face of it, it is surprising that the non-identity principle implies anonymity. The non-identity principle only says that what we may call non-identity improvements, replacements of worse off people by different better off people, make the world better. But the non-identity principle does not, on the face of it, say that non-identity improvements make just as much evaluative difference as the provision of ordinary comparative benefits. The non-identity principle thus looks consistent with a two-tier view, on which non-identity improvements matter, but they matter less, evaluatively speaking, than ordinary comparative benefits. Yet the two-tier view implies that the non-identity principle is true and anonymity is false, so how could the non-identity principle imply anonymity? The answer is that, as Parfit shows, the two-tier view is cyclic, or option set dependent, and therefore intransitive, or option set dependent. Okay, so if something relies on things on themselves, so that means you can't just say one is one's better than the other. So one might nevertheless wonder whether there might be some transitive option set independent population axiology which satisfies the non-identity principle but not anonymity. The preceding argument confirms that there is no such population axiology. Okay, so if you're trying to figure out how people like if you have populations that one's better than the other, and then you do have one that's better than this, and this is better than this, and this is better than this, but then this one over here is better than the first, then you've got a problem because you can't actually compare populations anymore because they're not transitive because the first one is also worse than the last one. Okay, but the question is, why would you do that? I don't know why you would ever do that, but that's why you have to. The only way to show that the alternative, the two-tier view, is not actually what you want. So I don't know this argument, but that's interesting that there's a cyclic axiology where one value is circular. You've got circular value sets. Okay. If anyone's out there who has questions, please let me know. I just think this is a little silly, but because I don't agree with the transitivity, but it's interesting little argument here. If you're trying to evaluate well-being in populations, what are you actually doing here? And why would you have a circular well-being in your population or in groups of populations? Very strange, but if you do that, it screws with the argument, and that's interesting. Maybe there's something there to talk about. So you'd have to see what Parfit said about the two-tier view. Okay, I believe most readers will find the non-identity principle rather plausible. Valpo says, I'm glad you're following. This is a rough one for me. Your contextualization is helpful. I'm glad I can sort of describe this stuff. I've seen this sort of argument a few times now where they're making loops of these things. Yeah, so should I, for that matter. And every time it happens, I'm like, why the hell were you doing this? But it seems like a lot of these arguments where you're trying to set up relative valuations really get tripped up on rings of valuations. And so it's interesting that it shows up. I've seen it a bunch of times over philosophy roulette, where you set up a sort of a ring of valuations, and that really messes with it. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier, is that if you like, you can like pretzels better than Cheetos, better than peanuts, but then you like peanuts better than pretzels. So it's like these rings really screw with these theories of valuation. But yeah, like they're just trying. What they're trying to do is basically finally get to draw. So yeah, like if you've got like one population here and one population, what I do, and one population here, they're trying to like make a map between all the people, like here, 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 back and forth, and like this one goes to like there or something. And so like if you can like make a map between like back and forth, then you're saying, look, okay, if you can do it and they're equal, like the people are equal, then like it's going to be equivalent. But then if not, what if like one's better than or equal to it, then this one is going to be the better off population. And so that's what they're doing. That's what they just said. The Pareto equals like this population here is going to be a bit better off. So this is the question. I don't know what's going on in the two tier, but it's saying, look, if you in some sense have more than one population, like and then they had the third population, population C. So like whatever happens is like if there's any overlap. So basically, you've got this. Oh God, that was a terrible circle. So you've got like this overlap right here. And so you're trying to like map between the individuals here, but there's no one to map through. Then what you can do is you can make a third population C here. And then like these people can be mapped out to like a third population. And then this can like swap back in. Because like if this one maps over here and then this one maps over here, you can like do a three-way map. And so this is sort of like a terrible, terrible drawing. I'm so apologize, it looks terrible. But yeah, so this is the thing. If you can like map between like populate like individuals here, 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 and like here, here, here. So like this one like maps this way. So you're mapping values of well-being across different peoples. So that's kind of what's going on in this. And you know, is this interesting? It could be if like you think that well-being can be mapped like with a sort of like equivalent numbers, then like this is gonna hold sway for you. I don't remember the last time I read Derek Parfit. I think I read Derek Parfit a long time ago, and I didn't like what I was reading, and it wasn't Parfit's fault. I think it was just a bad class. And so then I didn't read anymore. But yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. That class turned me off to Parfit. Like, it wasn't a bad thing I was reading. I just disliked that class. And I never went back. Yeah, see, and the author says, I believe most readers will find the non-identity principle rather plausible. You know, I could see where people would see this sort of mapping. Like, you got like this little mapping down there. Like, I could see where people would say, you know, like, I'm just as happy as that dude over there. You could swap me and him out. Why not? Okay. But perhaps some will find it more palatable to reject the non-identity principle than to accept anonymity. Can anything be said against this position? Yes. The consequences of rejecting the non-identity principle are more implausible than it might first appear. At least this is true if we accept plausible principles for comparing same-person populations, such as principle of same-person anonymity, according to which anonymously equivalent populations are equally good if they contain exactly the same people. So same-person anonymity is the uncontroversial part of anonymity. It implies no contentious claims about how the importance of benefiting people compares to the importance of replacing people. It merely states that it does not make an evaluative difference who gets what when everyone exists regardless of which population comes out. Yeah, because if everyone's the same, you're just doing one of these dealies. You've got one population, and you're mapping it only onto itself. And so if you're mapping one population onto itself, then it's uncontroversial that it doesn't matter what you're doing, who you're swapping out, because you're swapping them out for, in some sense, their equivalents. It is a very plausible principle, so I shall take it for granted in what follows, and in any case, the following argument can be adapted so as to make do with different principles for comparing same person populations. So suppose that the weak non-identity principle is false, so that for some population A better life L1 and a worse life L2, A plus L1 is not better than A plus L2. We shall assume that A contains a life at some well-being level W, strictly between L1 and L2 levels, unless the non-identity principle fails, only when this is not the case, which would be bizarre. This assumption is innocent. Yeah, so if you got somebody like, you got two people, that one is a higher one, you're just going to say there's some space in between. I mean, why would that fail? That's what they're saying is innocent. We write A prime for a population that differs from A only in that one person at W is now at the well-being of L1, and we write L prime 1 for a life in which the L1 person has well-being level W. So yeah, so instead of somebody here, there's going to be someone in the middle. Or what? No, the lower one's going up a little bit. By assumption, L plus L1 is not better than A plus L2. Same person anonymity implies that A plus L1 is equally good as A prime plus L1 prime. Given transitivity, these two claims imply that A prime L plus L1 prime is not better than A plus L2. But this would mean that it is sometimes not better overall for existing people to be made better off, while at the same time, worse off people are replaced by different better off people. This is an implausible conclusion. Yeah, you always want to get an improvement. And that's the thing. If you're saying that there is no improvement when we've defined them to be in between each other, so there's by definition an improvement, you're going to have a bad time. And so that's the thing. If you can replace people by slightly better versions of themselves, you can't deny that the non-identity principle is false. So sort of one of these, like, witness in the middle of two different options is guaranteeing that there is a difference between the options. And that's kind of the argument here, that that you can find a middle spot means that there's space between them, and so they have to be different, and so you can't say that they are equivalent. Oh, you had it in the dissertation? It is easier to see what is going on and why the conclusion is implausible if we consider a more concrete case. Suppose that because we reject the non-identity principle, we believe that A is not better than B in the case illustrated by the table below, where omega represents non-existence. So Adam is 60. Oh, Adam and A, B, and C is 60, 60, then 80. Steve is 80, omega, and then 60, non-existence. And Eve doesn't exist in A, is 40 in B, and does not exist in C. So A, B, and C are different groups of people. And so Adam is in all groups, Steve is in A and C, and Eve is only in B. So intuitively, C is better than B. Okay, because you've got a total grouping of 140, whereas B, you have a total grouping of 100 because it's 60 plus 40, Adam and Eve, versus Adam and Steve. So this person's just like got the Adam and Steve thing going, and happy Pride Month. Since intuitively C is better than B, same person anonymity implies that A and C are equally as good because, yeah, Adam and Steve, you've got Adam and Steve there and Adam and Steve here, even though Adam and Steve have different values in both A and C. So in A, Adam has 60, so you can see here. This is 6. Oh, well, whatever. That one's 60, and then this one over here is 60 also. And this one's 80. So. Transitivity then implies A is better than B in line with the non-identity principle. If we want to reject this instance of the non-identity principle, it thus looks like we have to say that C is not better than B despite appearances. But compare B and C directly, we can imagine going from C to B by making two changes. First, we make Adam worse off by 20 units of well-being. Second, we replace Steve with the worse off Eve. The first change clearly makes the world worse off overall. In this case, it is implausible to claim that if the second change occurs as well, the world is not made worse overall. To avoid this implausible claim, we should accept the non-identity principle. Yeah, so it's like, look, whatever Adam and Steve are doing, their total well-being adds up to 140, which is different from the 100 that Adam and Eve add to in world B. So, okay. The preceding argument is even almost done. The preceding argument is even more forceful in cases in which multiple worse lives could be replaced by multiple better lives. Yeah, if you add more better lives in, it's better off for everyone in that world. If the non-identity principle were false, so that the replacements were worse by better off. Replacements of worse by better lives sometimes fail to make the world better overall. It would seem natural to think that replacements of many worse by many better lives would likewise fail to make the world better overall, but this view has absurd implications. Yeah, I mean, this is basically, look, you can't add at that point, because you're adding up well-being. Consider two possible futures. In the first future, we present 7 billion inhabitants of Earth will each enjoy 80 units of well-being. You gotta love this. What the fuck is 80 units of well-being? Like 80 ounces of beer? Okay. And there will exist 7 billion future individuals, each with 60 units of well-being. Oh no, they took 20 milliliters of beer away from me. In the second future, the present inhabitants will instead have 60 units of well-being, while 7 billion future individuals who are non-identical to the individuals existing in the future will only have 40 units of well-being. Evolve Yourself, what's going on here tonight? Hey, Evolve Yourself, how you doing? Let's give Evolve Yourself a little shout out. Yeah, the buyout from Elsevier. That's exactly what it is. Evolve Yourself is a fantastic streamer. Can do a little... do this. Evolve Yourself is a mind metaphysician and philosopher of science, chess master, and meditation practitioner. And what we were doing here tonight is we were reading, we read a nice paper on selling out. It was suggested to us, but it was sort of in the literary field. And so I discussed a little bit of what it is to sell out in philosophy versus literary selling out, and they had some interesting discussions there. And then now I was sick of talking about literature and things that matter, and we were discussing units of well-being and what it is for comparing different groups of people with equivalent units of well-being, because metaphysics and why the fuck not. So yeah. It's a little bit of fun, it's like they're saying, look, basically the argument here is, and you can see my dumb little diagrams below. The argument is, if you can get a bijection, that's kind of what's going on. If you can get a bijection between different populations, then those populations are, for all intents and purposes, you can treat them as anonymous. And so you can just switch out the people for each other, and the populations will have equivalent well-being. And so that's the thing. But if you can do that, then apparently there's a principle of anonymity that's very strong that can be used in a lot of stuff. And so basically they're arguing that the principle of anonymity is a good principle, because if you have the ability to make these bijections, which they are arguing for, then you can use this very strong principle of anonymity in dealing with populations and their well-being. So that's what's going on here. And I'm making fun of units of well-being because I have no idea what a unit of well-being is, because that's just how I roll. I find units of well-being also in decision theory, where you get 3 units of money or something, completely ludicrous. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you're the sort of person that likes this kind of metaphysics, then this is actually I'm making fun of it, but it's a very nice paper. If you're someone that does deal with these sorts of things, then it's a very nice paper actually. So I mean, let's scroll up, see if we can get something kind of interesting for you. Yeah, so they're saying, like, look, if you've got a strong non-identity principle, basically saying, look, if you've got someone you can add into a population and their well-being is like higher than someone else you could add into the population, then that overall population's well-being will be increased by a greater amount because you add in a person with a greater well-being. And so with that, you can then get yourself an anonymity principle, which is saying that two populations with the same anonymous distribution of well-being are equally good. And then once you can say populations are equally good, apparently that's sort of important for this area. Now, I don't know enough about this area. It drives me nuts to putting do math on well-being because I don't know what it is. I don't think well-being is transitive is really what it comes down to. Why would well-being be transitive? Because like people I was saying earlier, you know, yeah, it's a ceteris paribus. They made it very clear that there's no negative effects on anyone else. They had a strong ceteris paribus. But like I was saying earlier, is like some people like peanuts better than pretzels, and some people like pretzels better than Cheetos. But does that mean the same people like peanuts better than Cheetos? Not necessarily. And this is one of these things out of like the economics literature. Some people like Cheetos better, like snack preferences are non-transitive. And so why would we think lives are transitive if we can't even agree on that snacks are transitive? So I mean, I could be dead wrong about that too. Like maybe questions of taste are independent of how we think of these abstract things, but I don't think so. Like it's like even we can test the questions of taste, but we can't test these other ones. Like they're too abstract. So this is my problem with this treating well-being in this way. But maybe I'm just hungry. All right, let me finish up. Let me continue. But feel free to talk. This is the end of the paper. So it's right here. Okay. So in the second future, the present inhabitants will instead have 60 units of well-being, while 7 billion future individuals who are non-identical to the individuals existing in the future will only have 40 units of well-being. If we suppose that it does not make the world better to replace any number of lives at level 40 by the same number of lives at level 80, an argument exactly analogous to that of the preceding paragraph shows that given the same person anonymity and transitivity, see, this is the transitivity thing, the second future is not worse off than the first, but we should not accept this conclusion. A change from the first to the second future makes every present person much worse off, makes 7 billion future people much worse off than the 7 billion who would otherwise have existed, and affects nobody else. This is obviously a change for the worse, and we should reject any principle which says otherwise. Yeah, because you're taking the people who had 80 units and swapping them out for people who had 40 units of well-being. That's terrible, by definition. Let us take stock. Suppose we accept the transitivity and choice set independence of betterness. We must then accept the non-identity principle on pain of absurd conclusions. Since the non-identity principle implies anonymity, we must accept anonymity as well. Doing so amounts to substantial progress. There are, broadly speaking, two basic questions in population axiology. The first is the question of how to compare populations which differ with respect to the number of people they contain. The second is the question of how to compare populations which differ with respect to the identities of the people they contain. Anonymity provides a full answer to the second question, namely that such differences in the identities of people make no all things considered evaluative difference. Okay, and that's what I was saying. My snark aside, this looks like it has a very nice conclusion for this area, because if you're worried about incommensurability of well-being, this provides a counter argument to it. It's saying, look, if we can have some independent concept of well-being, then it doesn't matter who it is. It's separated. It separates it out from the individual, and you can abstract away from the individual and say, look, this person's well-being is just as good as that person's well-being, and so we can discuss the two populations as if they had either of those people in them. And that's a nice thought if you want to talk about populations and how to talk about population well-being, which is what they do in axiology. Like, you want to talk about making like discussions of like populations and what to do. How do we increase our population's well-being? Was a political and social question, an important one. So it's like this paper goes to answering that, to that sort of question. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so we've got... No, that's the next paper down there. So this came out of the Stockholm workshop on population ethics and the non-identity problem. Yeah, so if like you want to do population ethics, how do you deal with groups of people and making everyone feel better? Like that's sort of important nowadays. So, yeah. But I mean, like I said, I have severe problems with transitivity in these sorts of areas. So that's why I don't... Like, I think it's a good argument, and if you accept these sort of things, you should accept their conclusion. But like, I just can't. I can't get it off the ground for myself. And this is one a good, if you're looking to argue philosophy, you have to hit the people hard, and you have to hit them early, and you have to hit them hard. And that's one of the few things I learned from a professor I didn't get along with as an undergrad. He always said you have to hit them right at the beginning, because otherwise once these people get rolling, you're not going to stop them. And that's what it is. Once these people got rolling, their logic is fine. I hit them right here. Third paragraph. And this is before they turn to make the argument. So this is the first this is like just in the warm-ups. This is where I hit them. I am hard and I'm strong, and that way I don't have to accept their conclusion. But like, if you want an idea about how to deal with philosophers, this is how you do it. You find something right at the get-go and you just disagree with it. And Involve Yourself says, if you don't accept the premise of transitivity, then you have to accept their conclusion, even if the logic is sound. That's exactly it. Their logic appears to be completely sound, but like, I don't think transitivity applies in this situation. And so in terms of just rhetoric in philosophy and argumentation, this sort of thing, if they're going to be doing technical philosophy, there's only two times to get them. One is at the very beginning, or the second time is at the very end when they're interpreting their results. And like sometimes they go off the rails. They say, oh wait, look, we proved all this stuff and then here's my conclusion. You can say, well, you didn't actually stick to what you proved. Sometimes that happens, but the real trick is get them early. Involve Yourself, you either reject a premise or object to the validity of one's argument. Yeah, that's basically it. That in analytic philosophy, this is the only way to do it. You have to get them early in a premise, or you can say, well, they fucked up their argumentation. Usually, if you're in a major journal like this, you didn't fuck it up. It does happen though, of course. It won't be obvious. But yeah, it's not going to be obvious. But like, that's what you've got to do. And like I said, and the other sometimes is you get them right at the end too. You say they overstated their conclusion, but that's usually that's not as that you won't. You're gonna have to accept most of what they said at that point anyway. So that's just a consolation prize if you're rejecting their interpretation of what they said. But yeah. Analytic Philosophy Argumentation 101. If you're past the second page, you're probably in trouble. So. And I mean, that goes for, sections, because this is a short paper. But like, if you're in like a long paper, you have to get them at their premises. Reject their premises outright if you can. Or you can, I guess there is one other option, which is famous. If you really hate the conclusion, you reject the argument outright, and you say the whole argument is confused. But that's don't do that. That's a advanced technique for idiots like me. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Your whole argument is dumb. But anyway, all right, I'm getting loopy. I'm at 3 hours and 20 minutes of arguing philosophy to myself and chat, and I appreciate you all for being here. Yeah, you can. Well, Involve Yourself. We can all go doing we can do a rhetoric day once and just be like, argue all the bullshit things we can come up with, all the bad arguments, and be like, you're not being clear. You're conflating two concepts. Blah blah blah. I mean, that'd be fun too. like all the bad arguments I can make. You know what? This is fun. I don't know if I told you this. So a racist person, was arguing on one of my reviews on a YouTube video, and they were saying that like I overstated something. I definitely was being over the top and I overstated something. But then they had a conclusion. They wanted to argue that basically some racist bullshit. So I let them argue their point because they were trying to make it look like they actually had a point. So they had research and stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I went and looked up all their papers. And, you know, of course they didn't prove anything. The idea that you're going to prove any racist conclusion, like you can't prove that sort of stuff one way or the other. You're not going to prove that like everybody's good, or you're not going to prove that some people are racist. It's just not the sort of thing that can be proved by science at the moment. So I just poke holes in all their arguments. Now, they were angry because I had completely screwed up my I had overstated what I needed to state in my review. But like I was blowing holes in all their arguments, and so by the end they're like, can't we just agree to disagree? I was like, no, you are straight up wrong. I've blown holes in all your arguments, and you can't even say that like my arguments are wrong at this point, because all of yours are wrong and you're just racist, and goodbye. But like it was a bit unfair on my part, but you know, screw that person. It's like, yeah, did I overstate one little thing? Yes. Are you going to be able to call me out on that? Not if I don't want to. Like, I don't have to put up with that shit. Exactly, Aristotle. Exactly. Don't put up with these idiots. Well, you know, I gave them a chance to see what they had to say, and they sucked. So they didn't have anything good to say. If anyone doesn't know, everyone go follow Aristotle immediately if you are interested in philosophical content. He is the man. So, yeah. So, but like, yeah. And now I'm coming up on 3.5 hours. If anyone has any questions for me, get them in now. Yeah, that was what I wanted to see. What the person, I didn't want to just ban them outright. I wanted to see what they were doing. But, you know, in the end, it's just not, they're not arguing. Either they didn't know they were wrong, or they were arguing in bad faith. Like, they may have actually believed that like the papers that they had been told proved what they wanted them to, they thought they did. They may have actually believed that like they had research. And yeah, it may have been ignorance, or it may have just been, you know, like just them trying to be like get one over on me. So I wanted to see what they were saying, but like, you know, I looked up the papers and I was just like, these papers could not possibly say what you're saying they say. So it's like maybe they were misinformed and were just kind of zealots and trying to say, hey, look, this is the gospel over here. You should check it out, even though they didn't understand it to begin with. But it's probably just being racist. Aristotle says, assume that you are part of a Justice League of superhero philosophers. Who are philosophers you would want on your team, and who are philosophers that you would want to be, who would be your villains? I think I've mentioned this to you before, Aristotle. Like, we were talking about anime once or something. It's like, who are you in like the anime? I was like, I'm not the main character. I'm not the main character. I remember this anime once where there was like a group of heroes and they were struggling against like some really bad thing, and there was this other dude who was like in their world and was just like walking along and would help them out sometimes. Like, they were like, you should come and join us, like, you understand how bad this is and like what we're trying to do. And the guy's like, yeah, it's bad and I appreciate what you're doing and like I support you. And they're like, well, why don't you help us? He's like, no, I've got my own problems, I'm busy, I'll help you when I can. And I feel like that dude. I feel like this guy off to the side. Like, I will help you when I can, but I'm not the main character. I'm not the hero. I will help you when I can, but I got my own problems, and, you know, I do what I can. So it's like, I'm not part of the Justice League. I'm like this, I'm somebody else. So I'm not part of the Justice League of superhero philosophers. I'm still kicking some villain butt, but, you know, it's what it is. Yeah. I'm not the main guy. I'm not even in the crew sometimes. I'm just some guy somewhere else. Alfred? I'm not a manservant either. I don't know about that. But It's like I don't know if I'd be a good butler. Maybe I would be. Like I said, I show up, I come and I go. So, although Alfred is kind of bad. Yeah, Lamp to Kant. Oh God. Oh great. I have to be a drunk manservant to Kant. I would have poisoned Kant. Thank you. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, getting screwed over by a dickhead. That's like the last thing I want in my life. Ugh. Yeah, like, okay, I'm a stuck up, prudish guy. Yeah, thank you, Valpo. I appreciate your support. I mean, thanks, Aris. Jeez, man. And on that lovely note, let's go look if there's someone to raid.